Alex Berenson in the mix once again. He is an author, a writer, researcher, Unreported Truths on Substack. I'm a subscriber. Recommend you all go check it out too. Alex, good to have you back. Let's dive in, if we can, to HHS being run by RFK Jr. If this one goes, well, actually, before I get to the what he'll do, how much resistance do you think there really is from the machine? Is it almost Gates level or substantially less in your mind?
No, it's at least Gates level. I mean, there's
wow.
money at stake here. Yeah, I mean, this is a big deal. This is $1 trillion agency, and he's going to be taking on one of the most powerful industries in the United States and the world. I think that President Trump or President-elect Trump will appoint him with a recess appointment if necessary, which might be necessary. Listen, the Gates thing is interesting because I think that's a lot of it's driven seemingly personally, that people just do not like him on Capitol Hill. But this one is much more substantive.
So what do you think about, like, what are the good things that he could do? What are you worried about him doing if he gets into this role, if anything?
Sure. I mean, he has a lot of ideas that that I think are. I don't agree. Let me put it this way: I don't agree with everything that RFK Jr. Thinks about medicine, about vaccines, and in general about what's making Americans unhealthy and how we can fix it. But I think the fact that he's being seriously considered, that he's being nominated for this, shows you how frustrated and angry the United States has become with public health.
Well, can I jump in there, Alex, just real quick? Just because, I mean, I think the CDC is what they did in COVID. I mean, this is why I wanted to have you on, because you were front and center, and you gave a lot of us you remember, I was one of the early ones on the right who was like, this is crazy, the lockdowns are nuts. Yep. And I was like, hey, there's this guy, Alex Berenson. I used to have you on my show when it was just my show before Clay and I teamed up. I think what the CDC did is vile. I think it lost all credibility with people that actually have brain cells and can think for themselves. And I think something dramatic needs to be done.
Yes. Well, I totally agree. And that's why I haven't taken a position on this. Not that anyone necessarily cares what I think. I think ultimately I'm going to support it. Even though I have misgivings about some of the specifics of some of the stuff RFK believes and says, because we need to shake up the public health establishment and the medical establishment and the medical research establishment in the United States, because they consider themselves better than the people they serve. And it comes out in 100 different ways. And, and they've lied more and more openly, right? So they've just been lying, right, at the NIH and elsewhere in the government about the fact that COVID almost certainly, all but certainly came out of a Chinese lab, right? They just won't admit it. And that's a huge thing because, many people died.
It is a lab that U.S. funding did go to this lab.
That's right. And there's a U.S. scientist named Ralph Barrick in North Carolina who's very, very closely connected with that lab. And he's also very, very closely connected with Anthony Fauci. So the fact that no one in the government has been willing to discuss this in a meaningful way in 5 years, that's a huge problem. The fact that so many people took mRNA vaccines and had serious side effects and then very quickly got COVID afterwards, and we're supposed to pretend that these work. And the CDC, I said this morning, the CDC doubled down on this by they're continuing to say that people, including infants 6 months old and older, should get an mRNA vaccine now. It is crazy that they will not have an honest conversation about this. And it is a response to this. It is a response to all of these individual things, and then together a response to the fact that we have a $4 trillion, trillion with a T, medical industry in the United States, and yet our life expectancy is basically the same as it was 20 years ago, and has gone down for a couple of years, went down during COVID, went down because of the opioid crisis. Our medical establishment is is in turmoil. It is not running well. It is in love with itself, and RFK Jr. is going to shake that up. Now, he's going to do some things that I don't like, that I don't necessarily think are scientifically
before we get Alex, if I may, before we get to what you don't like, people in the White House, or the White House to be, I should say, listen to this show, a handful of them, that I know for a fact. What should RFK? I mean, if you were an advisor to the head of HHS, given what you've seen with the way they play these games in the CDC, in on NIH, what are the big level things that should be done?
Yes. Okay. So in terms of vaccines, the number one thing that needs to happen, and I've said this publicly, and I'm going to keep writing about it. I wrote about it on Unreported Truths a few days ago. I'm going to write about it again. We need to end vaccine liability. Liability protection, vaccine immunity. Vaccines, you need to be able to sue over vaccine injuries the way you can sue over injuries for any other product in the United States, okay? They're not, and that's very important for two reasons, okay? First of all, what the pharma is not stupid, okay? And what pharma has done is it has sort of tried to get more and more products classified as vaccines, so they have this absolute protection, with some success, and that's something that they'll continue to do. But more importantly, by saying that, we're buying into this myth that vaccines are some miracle that can never be questioned, okay? They're so special and so important that a right that we have that extends to every other product does not extend to them. That's what we're saying when we allow vaccines to be completely immune from any lawsuits. And we shouldn't do that because they're not. They're just another product. They need to be judged normally as with risks and benefits. The second thing, and this is more complicated, I don't even know if this is possible, okay? But, and frankly, I think it might be constitutionally problematic. But we should try to figure out if there's a way to at least reduce direct-to-consumer advertising of pharmaceutical products, i.e. prescription drugs.
Let me ask you a question, Ms. Alex. I don't want to interrupt your flow because I'm liking all this information, but there's a theory. Here's the thing. People see these drugs. We all know the thing. We see somebody on horseback on a beach, and then it's like, and then they're like going through a field, and then it's like, something rab, and some drug you've never heard of before. You're like, I don't even know what this thing does. How is this advertising? And the theory that I see people put out there is, well, it's because they're buying off the entirety of the media with massive, massive advertising campaigns. And so they know they won't be criticized because you're not going to attack Pfizer. Pfizer's writing you a $10 million a year check. Is that what's going on? Because I don't understand how advertising for a product that nobody understands is advertising.
Well, so I think that is actually part of it. I've gotten more cynical about that part of it, and I think there's something to that. But what this does, and the companies know this, is it gets people to go into their doctors and ask, oh, you know what, like, do I have high blood pressure? Do I need, blah, blah, blah drug for that? And it gets them to ask. And there's another thing that happens, which is that it drives up overall spending on drugs. Why? Because the way this drugs industry works in this country is that you get patent protection for, about 15 to 20 years, depending on the drug and depending on how quickly you get it approved. And then that goes away. So once that goes away, the companies stop advertising it. They stop caring about it. And so the companies want to switch people from generic to branded drugs. And the advertising helps with that. So it's all those different reasons. But people point out correctly that we and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world where you can advertise these products directly to consumers. Now, I'm just not sure, honestly, whether there's a legal way to regulate this. In the U.S., we have First Amendment protections for commercial speech, and you can see, gambling and liquor and all kinds of ads on TV. People say tobacco. Well, the tobacco companies sort of voluntarily gave that up in the late 90s as part of a settlement, of all the, for all the stuff they've been doing for 50 years. So I don't know whether there's a way to regulate this, but certainly RFK should look at that.
Now, what would you want him to stay away from? I mean, if you were giving advice, hey, I think you shouldn't go down this rabbit hole, or it's not worth it, or, because you were about to go down there. I didn't want to stop you. I just wanted to get you on this side of it first. But what concerns you, or what advice would you give to RFK Jr. going in? Hey, man, don't try to do this. You got other things you got to handle.
Well, so this is going to annoy a lot of unreported truth readers, frankly, and maybe some of your audience, but I don't see, I mean, if he wants to do a deep dive into the science around the harms of older childhood vaccines, I'm not talking about the mRNA COVID vaccines. I'm not talking about new vaccines. I'm talking about the stuff that was around, that's been around for generations, that is sort of widely used. If he wants to, sort of try to figure out if there's any fresh way into that, I think that's okay. I think in the interim, it would be a bad idea to discourage people from taking those vaccines for their kids. I know there's a big argument about this, and I haven't looked at it deeply, but my sense is there's not good evidence that those vaccines, the older ones, cause autism, which is the big concern about them. And unless we have that, we shouldn't be discouraging parents from doing that, in my opinion.
Alex,
now
I don't know if
know,
but we on the show, we know some people. Would you serve in a capacity, advisory capacity, if asked by RFK Jr. at HHS?
Yes, I would do that. I mean, I'm not an MD, but I would try to help them ask the right questions. Yeah, I would do that. But they might not want me because like I'm expressing skepticism that they might not want to hear.
Well, what I would offer is that your track record on COVID shows that you follow the evidence, and if one of the ways they're going to shake up the culture of not just CDC but overall everything under the umbrella of HHS is to allow informed skepticism as part of the debate to get to the best possible solutions. I think you in there would make a lot of sense, right? Because you're not some true believer in one thing or another. You follow the evidence. I still remember when you came on this show in July of 22, I think it was. You were like, guys, these vaccines, the efficacy window is like a few weeks. We were getting hammered for having you on. You were 100% right.
Yep. And one other thing, and this is maybe more my thing personally, I'm not a big fan of like illicit drugs generally, right? Or, cannabis and the psychedelics, the stuff where there's been a strong move to legalize these things in the last 30 years. I don't see a lot of like help to the public health in that. And I know RFK, or I've read that RFK is interested in legalizing cannabis and legalizing, or encouraging medical use of the psychedelics. I think the evidence is really weak on that, and I wouldn't encourage that. But, I'm not going to go to war on that, but I don't think it's a great move.
All right. Well, Alex, we're going to keep talking to you about this as it moves forward. And what is accountability I've only got like a minute, but what does accountability at the CDC look like? I mean, what does real accountability there mean in 2025 if RFK Jr. can do it?
It would start by ending all recommendations for the mRNA vaccines and going into the CDC's relationships with drug companies and vaccine manufacturers. I'd start there.
All right. Excellent. Alex, thanks so much. Unreported Truths, everybody on Substack. I'm an early and longtime subscriber. Recommend you do it. Alex, appreciate you making the time for us.
Buck, tremendous pleasure. Thanks.
Look, teaching your family how to protect themselves is absolutely critical. And something I talked to Carrie about here. She's a woman. Sometimes she's got to go places without me around to watch over her. And so I want her to be able to protect herself. I want you and your family to be able to protect yourselves. Obviously, Second Amendment's a part of this, but depending where you are, depending on your comfort with the Second Amendment, a non-lethal option is also something that you should have and consider in your self-protection toolkit. Sabre makes incredible non-lethal products that are safe and less intimidating for some users to train with and use than a firearm. Sabre is spelled S-A-B-R-E. One of their best-selling items, by the way, is their Pepper projectile launcher, non-lethal and designed to have a 7 projectile capacity, offering up to 40% more shots than other brands for superior home defense. It creates a 6-foot pepper cloud, giving you and your family precious extra time. For nearly 50 years, Sabre has been dedicated to making the world safer. Clay and I have both been out training with the Pepper projectile launcher. Let me tell you, it's when you see what the irritant cloud looks like, and you realize you can hit somebody if they're a threat to you out at 20, 30 yards pretty easily. It's pretty amazing technology, but also it's a lot of fun when you go train by yourself. I'm just telling you, they can send these inert balls that you can train with, and then the irritant will look in a very similar cloud, very similar pattern. Go check it out for yourself. Visit sabreradio.com, S-A-B-R-E, sabreradio.com, or call 844-824-SAFE. That's sabreradio.com, or call 844-824-SAFE.